The following program is seen statewide on California Public Television. It's a beautiful day. All's right with the world. The sky is blue. The air is clean. We are standing here in this beautiful setting. I am standing with Superintendent
David Huell, LA County Parks and Recreation.
David, let's set the stage. We are standing in the northern part of Los Angeles County in the nice little community of Newhall, and we are in a regional county park. Tell us about give us some figures, the size and the scope of this park.
Well, sure. First off, we're both a park and a museum, and we have 265 acres here, 160 of which are natural oak woodlands, and we have a barnyard zoo with 75 animals, a heritage junction area where we have historic homes, we have 7 group campgrounds, and it's an amazing park.
There's a lot that goes on in this park, and now it's time to give away the name of this park.
You are at the William S. Hart Park and Museum.
The William S. Hart Park and Museum. And William S. Hart is a name that all Californians should know. Unfortunately, most of us don't know who William S. Hart was, but before this day is over, we will. So stick with us as we spend the day in this beautiful park, the William S. Hart Regional Park, which is indeed one of California's golden parks. Okay, the tour begins, and our tour guide is Jack Stewart. You're a volunteer. You also are I thought you might be a William S. Hart look-alike standing here, dressed like this.
Sometimes the kids ask me if I'm Bill Hart when they take the tours, yes.
Well, you're dressed like a cowboy, and William S. Hart was a cowboy, wasn't he?
He was a cowboy. He was a cowboy from New York, but he came west, and earlier in life he had lived with cowboys, so he knew what they were.
Okay, now, he moved west, and he ended up here in Newhall. And when you come out here to this park, we start the tour in this building right here, which is called
the Ranch House,
because originally it was part of his ranch.
Part of his Horseshoe Ranch.
Okay. He was a cowboy. He was also a movie star. And that's where we're going to go to find out that part of the story in the old ranch house. Okay, we're inside the ranch house being stared down by bison up there on the wall, Jack. This really was the ranch house. He really lived here.
Bill lived here, and he used it as sets for his movies and as an office. And these are items from his movie, Cold Deck, the roulette table, and the poker table.
All right, so this was part of a movie set, and that leads right into his movie career.
Right.
Because William S. Hart was an honest-to-goodness movie star, wasn't he?
He was one of the first big stars in Hollywood. He was the George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Ben Affleck of his day, all rolled into one. Yes, yeah.
Now, what do you mean by that? Those were the very early days of movies.
Yeah, the early days, but he went back to New York City during a Bond drive in 1918, and the largest crowd that had ever come to see a celebrity, 350,000 people came down to Wall Street just to see Bill Hart.
To see Bill Hart. Mm-hmm. Now, what was it about him that made him such a movie star?
Probably that he knew cowboys. He'd been a stage actor for 23 years, but he'd lived in the West at an early age. He was really from New York City, but he didn't like the way they portrayed cowboys in the movies, so he came west to make movies of realistic cowboys.
Now, what do you mean realistic cowboys?
He said that the early Westerns looked like lumberjacks from New England. So he really wanted to make Westerns that looked like Westerns. And so he came west, and they said Westerns are over. Well, he did almost 70 of them.
He made 70 movies in his career.
In his career, yeah.
Now, they were obviously all silent movies.
They were all silent. He never made us talkie, yet he had a wonderful voice because he was a stage actor.
And was he always the good guy? Was he the guy who rode in and saved the day?
No, he kind of came up with the idea of being the bad good guy. He would start out as a bad guy, end up as a good guy, save the heroine, things like that. Later, Clint Eastwood and Steve McQueen and some of those guys emulated him.
Now, I've seen the old pictures. I've seen the old movie clips. He had a good presence about him, didn't he?
Very good stage presence, yes.
He looked
the part, and he had the 2 guns. And in fact, he was one of the first movie cowboys to carry 2 guns. That's why they called him Two Gun Bill.
Two Gun Bill.
That's what his alias was, on the screen. Two Gun Bill.
And he had obviously fan clubs and adoring.
He had fan clubs that you wouldn't believe. Even Fritz, his pony, had fan clubs. And in fact, some days Fritz got more mail than Bill did.
So his horse was famous as well.
Yes. And he said, I don't care if Fritz gets more fan mail. He says, we're partners. So when he retired, Fritz retired, and if Fritz wanted to eat the front lawn, Bill said, that's okay. He helped pay for the house. He can do whatever he wants.
So the horse retired with him.
That's right.
Why did he retire?
He got kind of upset at the movie industry. He said that this was the days the studios were starting up, and he says the salesmen were running them, and he was an independent producer. He not only starred in 70 movies, he wrote and produced most of them and directed them. So he says, no, he was an independent. He just got mad at the movie industry and said, I'm going to retire. And he owned the ranch out here, and so he retired out here to the Horseshoe Ranch.
Now we've come outside and looking up this beautiful canyon here, Jack. This is actually probably pretty much the way it looked like when Hart lived here, isn't it?
It is. There are more trees here than there were, but yeah, most of it's just the way it was when he was here.
Still kind of wild country.
Wild West, right.
And you brought us here because this is one of the favorite stops on the tour out here. Tell us what we're looking at right here.
Well, this is Fritz's grave. Fritz was Hart's pinto pony, and he thought Fritz was the smartest horse he ever knew. In fact, he thought Fritz was smarter than most of the people he knew. This is where he was buried. He lived to be 31. He retired when Bill retired. In fact, in his old age, he couldn't chew hay much, so Bill had the cook make porridge for him and go out and feed him porridge.
So he really was attached to this horse, the way a cowboy is supposed to be attached to his horse.
He loved his horse, and Fritz loved him. He said he knew what Fritz was thinking. Fritz knew what he was thinking. They jumped off cliffs into rivers. They jumped through windows. Fritz didn't have a sidekick. They didn't have a stunt horse. Fritz did the stunts.
And he's still here.
He's still here.
On the ranch.
Yep.
And the marker there says, Bill Hart's pinto pony Fritz, aged 31 years, a loyal comrade. And he was. Okay, this is very exciting. This is another part of the park story. What's going on here, David?
Well, Huell, you know that William S. Hart was a lover of animals, and LA County Parks and Rec is trying to keep that tradition alive with the Barnyard Zoo here, where you can see 75 live animals. You can even feed them. We have vending machines in the gift shop and around the barnyard.
So it's kind of a petting zoo kind of a thing going on here.
Oh, it certainly is. People come from all over, and this is a great thing that families can do. And one of the curious things that we've got, I've got Mary here, who's one of our newest attractions.
This is a little bison.
Yes, it is.
Let's see what we got going over here, because this is, what are we looking at right here?
This is Half Pint, our donkey. She rides in the 4th, she walks in the 4th of July parade.
She does whatever she wants to do.
She does what she wants to do. She's the star at this park here. She's Half Pint, and that's all that needs to be said.
Wow, can you get her to move around a little bit? Watch it, she'll eat that hat.
Yeah,
this is great. Half Pint.
Yes.
So Half Pint has kind of replaced Fritz the horse.
Well, Half Pint is very of her own mindset, and she loves to go out in that parade, and I think she's a star here. She's our mascot.
Well, you've got a little bit of everything going on in here. We got a baby bison being bottle fed. We've got goats being fed pellets of food. We've got animals all around us. This is just part of the history of the William S. Hart Park. Okay, we're starting our hike up this quarter-mile trail, which leads us from the old ranch house and the barnyard down here at the bottom of the hill up to the big house at the top of the hill. We're going to be visiting that in just a minute, but before you hardly even get started on the trail, you come across this sign right here, Dog's Graveyard, and I think that involves a little bit of explanation. So let's go up and take a look at the Dog's Graveyard. Jack, there are 11, 12 tombstones up here.
Well, Hart loved dogs. He loved horses and dogs. His sister loved cats, so this is where he buried all of his dogs as pets.
Now, didn't he have two very famous big dogs?
He had two Harlequin Great Danes. They weighed about 90 pounds apiece. Prince Hamlet and Princess Angelica. They ran the neighborhood, and he went walking with them all the time.
All right, so far we've visited dog graveyards and horse graveyard. Let's get up to the top of the hill. Now, it's about a quarter-of-a-mile hike. It's not too...
It's a little steep, but it's not too bad.
And most people make that pilgrimage up to the top.
That's
because
true.
What's at the top is well worth the hike. David, this is absolutely spectacular going up this trail.
Oh, it is indeed. You know, when I first was transferred here, I started reading Bill Hart's will. And he passed away in 1946, and he was way ahead of his time. He even stipulated in his will that the County Parks Department should use native California plants to keep a sense of place and benefit the animals out here. And we're walking right now under a grove of native California coast live oak trees.
Wow, so he was into conservation and the environment even back then.
I think he was a pretty astute guy.
And he donated all of this to the county.
He did indeed. He donated not only the houses, the land, but his entire collection of artwork, including Charles Russell artwork, Remington artwork, and we've got a beautiful museum to show you.
We're going to see that up at the top of the hill, but before we get to the top of the hill, Jack, what is this? This isn't the mansion.
No, this is the bunkhouse. And there was originally a log cabin bunkhouse that was on this, and it burned down. So when Bill had the mansion built, he had this built at the same time. It cost $17,000 to build it.
Back in
1925, 1926.
So this is a historic building.
This is a historic building.
Now,
and
would cowboys have stayed in there, or guests, or movie stars, or who?
Movie stars, guests, cowboys, people down on their luck during the Depression.
Really?
As long as they'd work a little bit on the ranch, he gave them a place to stay. There were bunk beds in there. Now it's empty, and we use it for meetings.
Okay, we have reached our final destination. We've hiked up the hill past the old guardhouse here, the old turret that he built, right, Jack?
That's right, the gatehouse.
And we're right here now seeing this absolutely spectacular house. This is the big house, and David, it's a little breezy up here, which makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
It is, because he named it La Loma de los Vientos, which means the Hill of the Winds.
So it was windy when he built this house back in
1927. And actually, if you look at this tower up above us here, it's perfectly situated so that the breeze will float right through it. And he and his sister, Mary Ellen, would actually sleep up in this tower and take advantage of La Loma de los Vientos.
He took advantage of the wind.
Told you he was a smart guy.
All right, now before we go in the big house, we want to go right over here because this is something else that just kind of shows how special this place was when it was built. What are we looking at down here, Jack?
We're looking at what was once the swimming pool. The county bricked it in for safety reasons. But he used to swim here. His son would come out and spend weekends and swim here. His guests would come out.
Well, he was a movie star.
He was a movie star.
He's supposed to have a swimming pool.
Yep. He was a movie star. He had Will Rogers came out here to visit him. Robert Montgomery, Barbara Stanwyck.
You said Amelia Earhart.
Amelia Earhart.
So this was a place, even though it was out in the middle of nowhere, this place was moving. This place was humming.
His guests would come out and spend a few days. He has guest quarters in the house, and they'd come out and spend a few days. I don't think he threw lavish parties, but he had guests here, and he enjoyed entertaining his movie star and his movie friends.
Well, cowboys didn't like to be showy with their money. It was low-key money, wasn't it?
That was right, yeah.
It's cowboy money.
He said this wasn't a working ranch, it was a gentleman's ranch, and it cost him money every month.
As we approach the house, it's time to say goodbye to David and Jack. They've been good tour guides. Boy, look at this. This is this beautiful balcony right here.
Mary Ellen's bedroom upstairs.
Okay, there's a lot to see in this house.
Lot to see in the house.
We're getting passed off from one group. Thank you all very much. Now look at this guy standing here. Boy, you look like the real thing.
Well, thank you, partner. Appreciate it.
You've been a docent here
For over 10 years.
And you're going to give us the tour inside the big house.
I look forward to it.
Your name is?
Bill Crowell.
We're ready to go. Let's go inside, Bill. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. This is called the
Foyer.
The foyer, and it makes quite a statement when you walk in here. It's a little bit echoey in here.
The grand entrance.
All right. Now, where do you start your tours?
Well, we always start right down here in the dining room.
Now, wait a minute. What is a picture of Rudy Valley doing on the wall?
He was a very close friend of Bill Hart's, and he sang at Bill Hart's funeral.
Really?
Sang Western ballads.
There are so many stories up here. This tour could take 2 hours, but we're going to have to condense it. We are now in the...
We are in the dining room.
And this must a grand dining room it was. Did he have big, lavish dining parties?
He entertained rather lavishly, but he was not a wild man. Not like some of the parties today. Bill was a little more conservative, but he was a man's man.
Well, this is a beautiful setting, and you can just kind of project back in time to what it would have been like to have been invited up here and sit at this grand table and be entertained.
Yes, indeed. Now, of course, we have his portrait right up here on the wall now.
All right, now this is one of the more famous portraits of him in the entire house. Tell us about this portrait.
Well, this portrait was painted by a gentleman named James Montgomery Flagg. Now, a lot of people don't recognize that name today, but he's the man that painted the sign, Uncle Sam, I Want You.
Oh, boy. And how was he commissioned to do this piece of work?
Well, he was a friend of Bill Hart's, and he stayed down with Bill in his Hollywood home, and they drove up here to do the horse portion. They finished it up in Bill's home down below in West Hollywood. There was a little street behind it. It's now called the Sunset Strip.
Oh, wow. He had friends in every walk of life, didn't he?
Indeed he did. Bill was a roundabout man.
Wow. Now, what are we looking at over here? Horseshoes on the wall.
Well, here we're looking at Fritz, right up here at the top.
Oh, his famous horse.
Famous horse, Fritz.
And what about all these others?
Well, we have old Roney, who lived to be age 45. And several of the others here, they're all buried on the property, somewhere around in different places.
Because we've been to the dog cemetery. So were there lots of, all these animals stayed here, didn't they?
Well, this was a gentleman's ranch. No cattle, but a lot of horses and a lot of dogs.
Okay, let's keep the tour going because this was a big house. How big was his house?
He's got 10,000 square feet here.
Oh, boy. Here we go. The kitchen, the original kitchen.
Right over there, we have the original ice box that was in the house, Huell, and it was serviced by the ice company that still exists at the foot of the hill. And to the right, we have the old gas stove, still in working condition.
So he had gas up here.
Oh, yes, this was a very modern house for those days. Then, of course, in the far distance, you might see that orange juice squeezer, the little clown. That was a gift to him from his son, Bill Jr.
So this just points up how everything in this house, when he died, he donated everything just as it was. So the house is all original.
Very original, yes indeed.
Even down to the orange juice squeezer.
But not the oranges.
Now this is amazing, just walking up these stairs. And Bill, there's a story about the stairs themselves.
Yes, there is, Huell. These are made from all one pouring of concrete.
So this whole staircase is one pouring.
Exactly.
And the house itself is so well built, and boy, excuse me, this is absolutely, when you walk in here, you are overwhelmed at the feeling you have in this room.
This is the room where Bill entertained his friends like Wyatt Earp, Will Rogers, all those people of that era.
This was a living room, den, family room combination here.
It certainly was, Huell. This is where he spent most of his time.
Well, now, I have no idea what all I'm looking at here, but I'm sure almost everything in this room has a story behind it because this is all his stuff. This is all original.
All original, yes indeed.
What do you want to start with? What about the rug? That says something right there. I'm not sure whether it's politically correct these days, but what's the story behind the big old bear rug?
That once was a Kodiak bear from up in Alaska, and it was made into a rug, and his good friend Will Rogers gave that to Bill.
So that came from Will Rogers.
Indeed.
And what about the coat over there?
That coat is made from the hide and fur of a buffalo, a bison, American bison.
We've already seen the bison. There's his bison coat, and this beautiful portrait of bison on the wall over here, a beautiful painting.
Well, that's a world-famous painting by Charles M. Russell, who, again, as you know, was a personal friend of Bill Hart's.
Yeah, another one of his close personal friends. He had a lot of them.
Yeah, that he did.
Now,
that he
what
did.
about the work on the beams up here? This is absolutely spectacular.
Well, Bill had all the beams in the house commissioned to be painted, hand-painted, by artists to represent his younger days when he lived among the American Indians.
So everything here had a reason for being here. What about these swords up over the... How does that fit into the American West?
I'm glad you asked, Huell, because those were a gift from a Japanese couple who worked for Bill back during the 1930s, the Itos. But that's what is referred to as a daisho, a matched set. They're probably a little over 300 years old.
So they were a gift from the couple who lived and worked here.
Right.
And I've already been kind of tipped off that these two holes up in the wall over here have a story behind them as well.
Well, Bill's business, of course, was motion pictures. So he built a projection room up here behind this wall. He would invite his friends up, put a screen in the living room, and show them movies.
Yeah.
Later on, he built a motion picture theater here in town for them.
Really?
Oh, yes.
And this is not just out here by accident. This is out here, and the curator is very worried that we're going to touch this, but this is a historic piece in the house as well.
This is a quirt, which is a Spanish riding crop or a little short horse whip. It doesn't really hurt the horse, but it was made by a woman prisoner in the Yuma Territorial Prison. She was in there for murder. She made this, and a man named Wyatt Earp bought it from her, and he gave it to Bill Hart, along with a note. He said, "This is a good quirt made by a bad woman."
So wait a minute. Wyatt Earp gave this personally to William Hart.
Yes, he did. They were very close buddies, really.
This is amazing. And I got to tell you, in this room, we could spend... Well, there's his rifle collection over there. I'm sure there's stories behind every one of those rifles.
There are. There's a Springfield trapdoor and a Marlin. There's even a Japanese matchlock down there.
He's got the old radio off in the distance, which...
That cost him over $1,000 back in those days. It's called an Electrola. It's a combination radio and phonograph player.
And these Indian baskets, which I overlooked the first time, but which are obviously the real thing.
They are the real thing. Bill collected things of that nature, or people gave them to him.
So that's why this house is not just called a park, this is a museum.
Historic home.
And a museum.
And a museum,
because
right.
it has museum quality objects in the house.
Yes, it really does. Mm-hmm.
I cease to be surprised when I go from room to room, because this is a real treasure trove of history.
I think this is the main room that you
right
want
here.
to see. Right, absolutely.
Well, we're ending up here in my favorite room of the house. Here are our cast of characters here with a new character, Aisha. This is kind of interesting because this is a park and a museum.
That's right, Huell. The contents of the museum are administered by the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County.
And you've been here for a number of years.
Over 6 years.
So you have fallen in love with this guy, just like our other tour guides here today have. Tell us what is so interesting and fascinating about this guy, William S. Hart.
Well, I think that everyone could relate to William S. Hart. He has such a diverse background, whether you're interested in the acting or perhaps the Native American artwork, Western artwork. But basically, the William S. Hart legacy is something that everyone should learn about.
And what is that legacy? I mean, he was a movie star. He was a writer. He was a nature lover, an animal lover. He was involved, with the Braille Library. He was kind of a man for all seasons, wasn't he?
That's right. That's right. And I think that everyone could relate to him.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think enough people relate to him. How many people a year come to this park?
We estimated at 70,000, but I think we could bring a few more in.
Yeah, see, I want to get 570,000. I want the two of you all to be worn out at the end of the day. Because it really is an enriching experience, isn't it?
It is. It's fun, and I take kids through here. I take adults through. They're all very interested in it once they come through and see what's in here. And I climb up and down those stairs a bunch of times.
Why do so few people know who William S. Hart was?
Well, this city has been changing over the years, and new generations come through, and times change.
Yeah, it's kind of, one of those names that has dropped through the crack of history.
It is.
And it's a shame, because he was worth knowing.
Well, they all know the William S. Hart School, but that's as far as many people know.
Right here in this very community where he lived.
They named it after him while he was alive.
Well, at least a school's named after him, and this park is still here. This park and this home, this park and this museum. The William Surrey, because you let me know what his middle name was, William Surrey Hart Regional Park and Museum. This wonderful park, which is definitely one of California's golden parks. It's a beautiful and historic park, and if you'd like to go on this adventure again, or more importantly, donate a copy to your local school or library, it's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.